Well, Jack Martin, what did you think of what you heard the last hour? We heard in the form of Luis Gutierrez an outspoken advocate for comprehensive reform.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of disinformation with regard to the Arizona law, and actually one of the clips that was shown previously during the Gutierrez segment presented some false information. It said that the new law gave the police the right to stop people to ask for their immigration documentation. The new law provides that only after a stop in the course of normal business by the police are they in a position to ask for the immigration documentation. In other words, you do not stop people to ask them for their immigration documentation. So that's some of this misinformation that's being put out there.
So while you're doing other police business, you would ask if they're in the country legally?
If you have a reasonable suspicion that they may be in the country illegally. For example, if you stop somebody who's weaving down the road, like maybe they're drunk, and you ask them for documentation, they say, well, I don't have a driver's license. If they had a driver's license, that would indicate the fact that they were there legally, because Arizona only gives its driver's licenses to people who are legally in the country. If they don't have a driver's license, the patrolman can check his computer and find out if a driver's license was issued to that person. If not, then he has a reasonable suspicion for asking for some sort of identification as to why they're legally in the country. If they don't have that, they can be taken in. Some of the other information that you gave was that the police then become immigration agents. Well, they don't. They are not able to determine a person is illegally in the country. Only the federal government under the Arizona law can decide that. But the Arizona police officer has to contact the federal authorities in order to have the federal authorities make that determination as to whether or not the person is legal or not.
Right. That was not a legal statement as much as it was a colloquial one. It in effect gives the Arizona police the power to make inquiries about the enforcement of federal law. It doesn't
Actually,
make
they had that power
legals.
already by a unanimous Supreme Court decision. It was decided in 2005 that that any police officer anywhere in the country has the right to ask a person for their immigration document. And it has been federal law for ages, for decades, that legal immigrants are required to carry their identification with them.
So, Laura, what's changed? Doesn't sound like much has changed from Jack's point of view by SB 1070.
Well, SB 1070 we know would have a devastating impact on the Latino community because it would allow for profiling and it would enshrine that as part of the state law. We know that this would impact not just those who aren't carrying legal papers, but it would lead to stops for the majority of Latinos in the state of Arizona who are U.S. citizens and permanent residents.
So, but when you say it's devastating, what's devastating about it? And if people have, if people are here in a way that's conforming with the laws, what would bother them or intrude on their lives about 1070?
Well, it's against the law to profile. It's against the law to stop someone based solely on their race. So we are concerned that this law will allow police to ask Latinos for their documents. And a lot of those Latinos who would be stopped are U.S. citizens and permanent residents. So for example, if a U.S. citizen is out for a jog and doesn't carry his or her driver's license, then that U.S. citizen or permanent resident will be under suspicion. And that's just not something that we want to have in this country.
Jack Martin?
You don't stop somebody for jogging. That's not breaking a law. So, you know, the point is that police in their normal course of business are stopping people for infractions of what is Arizona law. It may be drunk driving. Under the new law, actually, there is a provision that you no longer can be soliciting workers on the street. This is to deal with the problem of the undocumented worker who is lining up at a busy intersection trying to get a job. you may stop that driver because of the fact that he is in violation of the law in terms of picking up somebody on the street corner who is looking for a job, and you could ask them for their identification. At that point, you know, it's normal for police to stop, to ask for driver's licenses of people that they stop. This is routine all over the United States. There's nothing new about that. But then that starts a process, because if they don't have a driver's license, then you have a reason to ask them about their immigration status. So, you know, it is only in the course of normal police work that this happens, and it is not the police that is going to decide that a person is illegally in the country. That's a federal responsibility.
Eleanor Pelta, I've just gotten two different versions of the same landscape. Where do you come down?
Well, it sounds so simple and so neutral, but it's really not simple or neutral at all. What happens is the law enforcement officer, in the course of a lawful stop or lawful contact, is required to ask about a person's immigration status if the law enforcement officer has a reasonable suspicion to believe that the person is here unlawfully. So the question is, what is the basis for that reasonable suspicion? That's very, very broad.
Well, Jack Martin just gave the example of not having a driver's license at the time of a traffic stop, from which an officer might infer that since Arizona doesn't issue licenses to undocumented residents, he might assume then that you're in the country without legal sanction.
And that assumption may be completely incorrect. As Laura pointed out, you might have accidentally left the house without your documentation. You might be going down to the corner to buy a bagel and not have your papers with you. There could be a number of different reasons why you may not have documentation to show whether you're legal or not. The worry is that this won't just open the door to racial profiling, that in fact the hinges in the door are completely blown off. And there really would be no basis to decide whether even to ask for identification except for an impermissible basis, such as the way someone looks or sounds or is perceived by the law enforcement official.
Is that really such a problem that we shouldn't enforce immigration laws for fear of creating an uncomfortable moment or offending someone who may be a naturalized citizen or left their driver's license at home?
Well, one of the big problems with the Arizona law is that it's a state law. We should be enforcing the immigration laws. There's no doubt about it. But it's a federal responsibility to enforce the immigration laws, not a state responsibility. And one of the problems with the Arizona law is that you really can't have a number of different states re-articulating federal law and then enforcing the law in its own particular way. Otherwise, you're going to have a patchwork of a lot of different inconsistent events in law enforcement with respect to immigration. That's not really in our national interest. We have a national interest in having a uniform system to control immigration in the United States.